Starting in 2026, Canada is implementing a quota system on internal combustion engine passenger vehicles. And buried in those regulations somewhere is what some people are calling a $20,000 tax on gasoline-powered cars. Yes, really. If manufacturers exceed their allotted number of vehicles, they pay $20,000 per gasoline-powered vehicle. Think this won't affect car prices? Well, think again. And this isn't some far-off fantasy. This starts next year, and most Canadians don't even know it's coming. I'm not anti-EV. I've driven some truly exceptional EVs on the show that redefine what cars can be. But when government regulators start playing automotive nanny like we're all incompetent children who can't pick our own toys, well, that's when the real fun starts. Buckle up, my friends. This'll be a wild ride. I'm your host, Brian Makse, racer, lover of driving fast, fun things, and on this channel, you normally get reviews for drivers from drivers, but this episode isn't about horsepower or handling. Instead, it's about your wallet and your freedom to choose what to drive. Canada's EV mandate is about to restrict your options and hit every Canadian driver financially. And that's whether you're shopping for a new car or holding on to an old one. If you care about value and choice, you need to know what's coming. This is the kind of policy that makes you think that Canadian regulators looked at Cuba's classic car situation and said, that's lovely, maybe we can do it with more paperwork and less beaches. Starting next year, automakers will be forced to play a game of high-stakes musical chairs. But who will be the ones left standing when the music stops? Car buyers at a charging station in minus 30-degree weather. Only Canadians could implement something so controversial so quietly. In America, this would have sparked a revolution. And special edition F-150s with Constitution decals. But in Canada, a polite press release, a few news articles, and maybe someone aggressively sighing while waiting in line at Tim Hortons. Fun fact, in 2030, 60% of new vehicles on the road in Canada will have to be electric. But the Canadian government, well, they've only committed to about 12% of the required charging infrastructure. It's kind of like building an airport, but forgetting the runways. This mandate is like watching some line cooks slowly turn up the fire under a pot of frogs. And we're the frogs. The government's got us in the water, and we're just sitting there, oblivious. 20% EVs in 2026 feels like a nice warm bath after a long day at work. Actually kind of pleasant. You think maybe this isn't so bad. 60% by 2030, and you're starting to sweat, getting a little uncomfortable, but you tell yourself it's probably nothing. 100% by 2035, and you're completely done. Cook through, ready to serve, while the cook, some bureaucrat who's never worked in a real kitchen in his life, stands over the pot explaining how he's just actualizing your biological potential through climate-conscious cooking techniques. They're boiling us alive, plating us up for their green energy dinner party, and we're too busy enjoying the warm water to jump out. And the irony of requiring a charging infrastructure in rural Canada isn't lost on anyone. It's like expecting five-star cuisine in the middle of the desert, but instead of camels, we have moose, and instead of sand, we have snow. Lots and lots of snow. Canada's quietly implemented escalating rationing, gradually increasing to zero internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035. And most people miss this because it was buried deeper than their warranty fine print. The infrastructure barely exists, and EVs in the winter are about as practical as sandals in a snowstorm. So how does this regulatory machine actually function? Well, the mechanics of it are even more absurd. The mandate works through credits, and every EV sold earns credits, and automakers must meet annual targets. But think of it this way. In 2026, you're playing a video game and you start at the level of challenging, but by 2035, it ramps up to Dark Souls. Full electric vehicles get 1 credit. Plug-in hybrids get between 0.15 and 1 credit depending on range. It's like a corporate performance review where the electric vehicles are the employee of the month, and the gas trucks are on probation waiting to get fired. Missing your quota costs $20,000 per credit. That's like blowing your data plan, and instead of $10, it costs you the price of a Honda Civic. Manufacturers can bank credits, they can trade credits, or they can create credits through designated zero-emission vehicle activities. It's like a weird game of Monopoly, but instead of trading houses and hotels, you're trading imaginary electric vehicles. Fun fact, that $20,000 cost of a compliance credit is indexed to inflation. So instead of just making cars unaffordable today, they have to make sure that they're unaffordable in the future. The $20,000 compliance mechanism is the political equivalent of "I'm not touching you." It's technically not a tax, it's a contribution to designated zero-emission vehicle activities. Yeah, just like I don't have a racing addiction, I have an ongoing contribution to the motorsport arts. If they call it what it is, a tax on non-electric cars, there would be riots. When they call it a compliance mechanism, everyone's eyes glaze over faster than the audience at a timeshare presentation. Of course, they've put a cap on how many credits a car company can create through financial contributions, starting at 2% of a company's fleet in 2026 and maxing at 6% by 2030. It's like telling someone they can play a video game, but they can only use cheat codes for 6% of it. The remaining 94% they actually have to play. Plug-in hybrids are stuck in some kind of automotive purgatory. Not enough gasoline for petrol heads and not enough electricity for the government, yet still somehow expected to bridge the gap. So there's your compliance credit system, a bureaucratic shell game where manufacturers can trade imaginary vehicles while facing real $20,000 penalties. But here's what most Canadians don't seem to understand. This isn't some abstract policy that isn't going to affect them. Starting in 2026, manufacturers must meet electric vehicle quotas or pay massive fines. 20% by 2026, that's next year, 60% by 2030, and 100% by 2035. If you're a manufacturer and you miss your quota, well, pay 20 grand to the government per vehicle. These costs don't disappear, and you know exactly who's going to pay. The government bypassed market choice, forcing manufacturers toward quotas regardless of consumer demand, infrastructure readiness, or the suitability of EVs in our very unique climate. Perhaps they were counting on you not noticing until it was too late, because this policy has direct consequences on which vehicles you can buy and what they'll cost in the future. This mandate has the complexity of crypto and the transparency of a black hole, and yet somewhere in Ottawa there's a bureaucrat with a spreadsheet who's going to determine what you can drive in the future. Analysts report that price increases are on their way. For crossovers and SUVs, they're going to be up between 12 and 15% in 2026 alone. Full-size trucks between 18 and 22% by 2030. That's a bigger markup than dealers added to Honda Civic Type Rs during the global supply chain crisis. When you artificially constrict supply, what do you think is going to happen to the price of internal combustion engine vehicles? Manufacturers may start culling their lines like it's the automotive Hunger Games. First to go may be the niche models, the fun little oddities that sell in small numbers but give brands their personalities. This BMW Z4 with the manual, the Mazda MX-5, the Toyota GR86, the Volkswagen Golf R, will they be offered up as tribute to the quota gods? Then they'll come for the entry-level models, because if you're only allowed to sell a certain number of vehicles, why not maximize profit on each one? The math is simple. If you can only serve so many customers, you drop the value meal and focus your attention on premium steaks. The future of internal combustion engine vehicles is premiumization. They'll slap leather on everything and charge you for the privilege. Soon, the only people who will be able to afford internal combustion engine vehicles will be maple syrup barons, NHL team owners, and those who figured out how to buy a Bentley on a Tim Hortons franchise subsidy. Those price increases of between 12 and 22% will hit like that moment when you see the final price after all the dealer fees. Imagine walking into a dealership in 2026, pointing at a mid-size crossover and hearing "great choice," that'll be $75,000 or your firstborn, whichever one has better credit. Nothing brings out car dealer creativity like having to explain price increases. They'll have PowerPoint presentations, pie charts, and maybe even interpretive dance routines explaining why that Honda CR-V now costs as much as this BMW Z4. Entry level will actually mean entry level luxury, and actual luxury brands will have to install things like solid gold shift knobs just to differentiate themselves. Regular people buying regular cars will be the real victims here. The finance bro on his third new 911 won't notice the difference, but the family trying to buy their first new Corolla definitely will. Your vehicle options will shrink faster than daylight during a Canadian winter. Price increases will make the infamous market adjustments from a few years ago seem like a rounding error. At least then, dealers were just being opportunistic. This is systemic. Fun fact, dealers are already developing new terminology like compliance-optimized pricing and regulatory value adjustment. Both of those translate directly to this is going to hurt your bank account, but it gets worse when we look into what's going to happen to the used car market. But wait, there's more. Before we dive into what this does to the used car market, let's take a reality check on how this transition is actually going so far, because the numbers tell a story the government doesn't want you to hear. How are those EV sales actually going, you ask? Well, Q1 2025 saw adoption fall to just 9.7%, down from 18.9% in Q4 2024. That's not a gentle decline, that's falling off a cliff while the government insists you're still climbing upward. Early 2025 numbers show national EV share dropped to 8.6% compared to 12.9% the previous year. The trend line looks like a ski jump, except instead of launching into the air, we're headed straight into the ground. March 2025 delivered the knockout punch. EV sales plummeted 45% year over year following the end of federal rebates. It turns out when you remove the financial incentive and keep all the drawbacks, people make rational decisions. Who could have predicted that? And that federal EV rebate program that was supposed to make EVs affordable, well, it ran out of money on January 23rd, 2025. The program went from helping Canadians go electric to sorry, we're closed, faster than a Tim Hortons running out of double-doubles during rush hour. The current minority government was elected promising those $5,000 rebates, but since the money dried up, now they're making empty promises about a return while refusing to say when or how much. It's like a contractor saying they'll definitely finish the job while packing up their tools and driving away. Quebec is now the only province offering EV rebates for car buyers. It's like being the last person at a party who still thinks the music's too quiet. Technically correct, but completely out of sync with everyone else. Ending rebates just before starting quotas is like cutting someone's parachute cord mid-jump and then mandating they must land safely. It's almost as if they want this policy to fail spectacularly while blaming consumers for not embracing it. Under this mandate, here's the new vehicle reality. Prices jump significantly, beloved models vanish, and survivors get luxury features to justify premium pricing. Automakers may eliminate affordable enthusiast cars first, leaving expensive options for buyers who view transportation as a luxury rather than a necessity. But these disruptions are just the beginning. The used market effects will be just as dramatic. The used car market may become a tale of two extremes. Newer gasoline-powered models, think the high-volume ones, will face rapid depreciation. Meanwhile, certain cars and trucks, the enthusiast models, the ones we like, will become highly sought after as the supply dwindles. It's the automotive version of natural selection. Boring commuter cars will depreciate faster than ever, while those vehicles with passionate fan bases will appreciate into collector status. Your CR-V might tank in value, but that Civic Type R, that's retirement fund material. It looks like plug-in hybrids will command a 19% premium in the used car market. So in this case, it turns out that not committing to either side finally pays off. Before long, used internal combustion vehicle inventories will drop dramatically. That'll make finding a good used gasoline-powered car harder than getting a same-day appointment with your doctor. This'll be great news if you're holding on to a plug-in hybrid, but if you just bought a gasoline-powered crossover, well, I hope you weren't counting on resale value. That's about to drop faster than your Wi-Fi signal when everybody's working from home. The market fragmentation will get weird too. Quebec and Ontario will see EVs retain their value a little bit better than other regions. And out on the prairies, with their harsh winter climate and long distances from one city to another, I can't see EVs retaining their value very well. It's like we're creating regional automotive dialects. You'll be able to tell where a car was originally sold by its price tag. The used car market will split faster than opinions at Cars and Coffee when someone fires up a straight-piped Civic. Enthusiast cars with manual gearboxes will become highly sought after, and regular cars will become as desirable as gas station coffee. I think the the only winners are going to be those who buy the right vehicle at the right time, like those who bought Dodge Vipers before the rest of us realized they were being discontinued. The rest of us, I think we'll be left wondering why our perfectly good vehicle is suddenly worth less than the extended warranty we regretted buying. The secondary market faces upheaval. Some gas vehicles become appreciating assets while others turn into financial anchors. Regional automotive economies will emerge where identical cars hold vastly different values. Finding reliable used gas vehicles becomes a treasure hunt with poor odds. But even trying to navigate these rapidly changing markets for new and used vehicles leaves one fundamental question. If you buy an EV, where are you going to charge? It's forecasted that by 2040, Canada will require 679,000 public charging stations. Right now, we have 34,000. That's like promising to put a Tim Hortons on every corner when you've barely got one per city. Canadian winters and EVs are natural enemies, much like road salt and undercarriages. At minus 15 degrees Celsius, the average EV loses 30% of its range. That means your expensive 400-kilometer Tesla becomes a very expensive 280-kilometer Tesla in the winter. Trying to make EVs work in a Canadian winter is like wearing flip-flops in a blizzard. You can make it to your front door, but you're not getting to Winnipeg. If you're in Vancouver or Toronto, you'll probably be just fine. But if you're in Winnipeg or Saskatoon, well, your EV might have the effective winter range of your favorite food delivery app. The charging network in rural Canada will be spread thinner than a politician's promises. You'll need to plan your charging stops with all the precision of a military invasion, but instead of an invasion, you're just going to visit your grandmother in Edmonton. Less than 5% of Canada's fast chargers are in the territories, and there are still massive gaps between many of those stations. That's not a network, that's a bunch of random points on a map with hopes and dreams in between. The infrastructure picture gets even better. Official sources say we need between $300 billion and $500 billion for adequate charging infrastructure, but some independent experts suggest it's more like $1.1 trillion. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between buying a house and buying a small country. And when your infrastructure costs have a margin for error in the hundreds of billions of dollars, you're probably not ready to mandate anything. Fun fact, $1.1 trillion for infrastructure improvements means every Canadian would need to contribute about $27,500 just for the privilege of this mandate. The gap between official estimates and expert projections suggests the government's infrastructure planning has been done with the same precision they use for budget forecasting. Which is to say it's much like throwing darts at a dartboard while blindfolded. Actually, that's a little bit more than they've done recently. And don't forget, we're talking about the same infrastructure that struggles to meet demand when everyone turns on their AC during a heat wave. But we are talking about the kind of money that should make governments sweat. It's colonize Mars money, not improve the power lines money. Perhaps blackouts will become so common that they'll name them like they name hurricanes.
Summer blackout Brittany is moving in from the west and expected to hit major corridors by Thursday.
And the best part, we're mandating EVs years before the infrastructure can be ready. Multi-unit residential buildings will need retrofits that will cost between $3,000 and $17,000 per port. Just try getting your condo board to approve that when they still haven't fixed the elevator that's been temporarily out of service since 2018. So let me get this straight. Canada needs 2,000% more charging capacity while upgrading a grid that already struggles. Winter weather dramatically reduces EV range, rural areas face abandonment, and cost estimates vary by hundreds of billions of dollars. It seems we're mandating technology that doesn't exactly work as promised in our very unique climate, using infrastructure that doesn't exist while removing preferred alternatives. Now, is this really a tax? Technically, it's called a compliance mechanism. But here's the thing, it's not about terminology. Whether you call it a tax, a compliance mechanism, or a mandatory contribution to the minister's Ferrari fund, the result is the same. Manufacturers will either limit internal combustion engine vehicle availability to stay under quota, pass the costs on to consumers, or likely both. That $20,000 compliance fee, that's like paying support to your ex after she's already taken your house, your dog, your dignity, and now she wants your drivetrain too. This whole mandate seems to be implemented with the same strategic genius as someone who would build a bridge from both ends without measuring the distance in between. It's breathtakingly arrogant, willfully ignorant of basic facts, and destined to fail spectacularly at taxpayers' expense. It doesn't matter what we call it, but what matters is that starting in 2026, Canadian motorists will face higher prices and fewer choices for many of the vehicles they still want and need. And remember, this isn't some conspiracy theory, it's right there in the regulations. And the government has effectively told car makers, sell fewer internal combustion engine vehicles, make them more expensive, or pay us. And guess who foots that bill? So the system is designed to force EV adoption through quotas and penalties, but EV sales are actually cratering without incentives. It's like trying to push a rope uphill. But somehow, this is supposed to work when manufacturers face real financial penalties for not hitting targets. Even industry groups with names so dull they could be prescribed as sleep aids. The Canadian Automobile Dealers Association, Global Automakers of Canada, and the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association have all slammed this policy. And when you've got dealer groups and manufacturers agreeing on something, it's like seeing your cable company and your phone company working together to help customers. You know something serious is happening. The silver lining? This only affects new vehicle sales and your gas guzzler won't be confiscated, at least for now. It's like being told, here's a cake, but we're banning all future baking. As of today, here's where things get really interesting. Despite mounting industry opposition and EV sales actually declining, the federal government is doubling down on these targets like a gambler at 3 a.m. who's convinced the next hand will win everything back. The government's response to falling EV sales and industry criticism has been the political equivalent of sticking their fingers in their ears and humming loudly, "Can't hear you, mandate stays, everything's fine." It's like watching someone insist their GPS is correct while driving straight into a lake. The data say one thing, reality says another, but this policy steamroller keeps rolling forward. So let me get this straight. EV sales are cratering, rebates are gone, Canada needs 2,000% more charging capacity while upgrading a grid that already struggles, rural areas face abandonment, and cost estimates vary by many, many billions, if not trillions. And the solution is mandatory quotas starting next year? It's like forcing everyone to play hockey on rinks that don't have ice yet. They're mandating a transition to technology that people aren't buying, using infrastructure that doesn't exist, funded by money we don't have. But hey, at least we have a plan. And let me be crystal clear, I'm not bashing EVs. In case you didn't notice, we've driven the Toyota BZ4X and the Polestar 3 in this episode, and each does a fine job fulfilling its own design brief. And I've tested some that deliver way more fun than an expense account-fueled 3-day weekend in Vegas. But when government starts playing automotive hall monitor, deciding what we can and can't drive like we're all incompetent kindergartners, well, that's when democracy's transmission starts making unhealthy noises. What's your take? Necessary progress or bureaucratic nonsense run amok? Let me know in the comments below. If you're Canadian, maybe give your MP a reality check before they completely lose touch with actual voters. Appreciate you joining me for this episode. See you again next time.